Today, we're here to tell you a story, and our story comes from a little bit different end than what we've heard a lot. And as someone whose primary focus is teaching graduate students about pedagogical practice and theory and instructional design, it's been, I feel, a little bit out of my league here, but it's been fascinating to hear a lot of the creative and interesting adoption and adaptation of technology that's occurring across all of these libraries and archives and museums. This afternoon, what we'd like to do is tell you a little bit about how a now 198-year-old library system has evolved really and to take into consideration the evolution of technology within the role of the library, the central library on a university campus. So a little bit of brief local context. The Indiana University Libraries are the 12th largest library system in North America. And I say that because, as you just mentioned, things like Avalon Media that is hosted at our library institution, and some of these very high-profile things, most of which I have no understanding of the back end, so I can't talk about that, although I was kind of thinking maybe I should just make some things up. But what has happened is, over the course of about 180 years on our campus, there was a really intense focus on building this research collection, this collection of information, the 12th largest volume of which across North America. What happened is once we got into the 21st century, a lot of ideas and primary emphasis and focus on what we're doing in the libraries has changed. And so over the course of those 198 years, our physical library has really only been, I can count on one hand the number of places it's been on our campus. So for the past 48 years, our main central library, the Herman B. Wells Library, that was built as this sort of monument to the collection, a windowless, limestone, very brutalist box is really what it is. Something's really started to change, however, once we crossed into the 21st century. So part of our narrative is to talk about how what has really the evolution of very little change, and mostly just a preservation of these materials, has really sort of accelerated within the last 17 years or so. And most of that is due, and principally due, to the fact that we have a university president who is very IT driven and made it really a mission of his presidency to not just increase and improve, but really magnify the technology infrastructure of our campus. And what that has done is it's presented us an opportunity to really partner and collaborate with a central IT department to really change quite dramatically our library spaces and in turn the library services and the way that we interact and engage with our community. So we got a big library. We got a lot of books. And I could sit and bore you with circulation statistics and tell you that declining use, yada, 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 right? So we are not unique in our approach to try to find new ways and new creative ideas on how to not just the people are already coming into the library, but really to support research across the faculty, the students, and really improve that experience that our students and our community of users are having within our spaces. So in 2002, the first big dramatic physical change within our main library occurred, and it wasn't the Learning Commons. And we, like a lot of other big library systems, are really keen on the commons space now. This will probably change in 10 years or so when it has another pithy, better name, I don't know. But this Learning Commons, first iteration in our now 48-year-old library, was an undergraduate library. So it had a focus on undergraduate studies. It had a print collection whose primary existence is to support the general education curriculum of undergraduates. In 2002, that was sort of rebadged in an interesting way. It was relabeled as an Information Commons. A lot of that print collection was relocated. Some of it was just kind of pushed up into the library space. Some of it was pulled out as a result of our offsite storage facility. And what happened in that Information Commons space is the space was broadened by the removal of the print collection or a majority of the print collection, and a lot of technology was brought in. We had a large number of workstations. We had some internal IT support for that. And then that kind of stayed stagnant for about 10 years or so as an Information Commons. After that, it was sort of re-envisioned once again. And interestingly, it existed in kind of a dichotomy, because in one way, it was infused with even more technology, and in another way, a lot of technology was actually removed from the space. So when the Learning Commons opened about 7 years or so ago, what happened is there was a real observation of the ways that students were using our spaces. So one of the things that we saw was they weren't using a lot of our workstations, of which we had hundreds of them in this space. So 75% of those workstations were actually removed. But instead, what happened was our University Information Technology Services unit became a 50% partner in this space. And what we have now is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week space that is staffed by university technology consultants, so you can get technology help throughout that course of that time. And it also includes a pretty rich service hub, so it's not just technology support, it's support across the student research lifecycle. So in addition to our technologists, we have research consultants, librarians, library assistant research consultants. We have a pretty robust peer research and peer assistance program. We've also partnered with the Office of the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education, and they have dedicated units within that space that support things like, things that I would consider student life issues. So they have a peer consultant team that works with students about everything from registration and those sorts of things, as well as having our writing tutorial services. So our campus writing program has a writing support unit, physical unit within that space. So it was a really an interesting and sometimes problematic but mostly successful partnership when the libraries own that space, but there is this 50-50 collaboration with IT. So we don't always necessarily agree with use and administration of the space, but at the end result, everyone is sort of focused on the end user as well. That's my one technology term there. So the Commons idea in the Indiana University libraries didn't stop there. But wait, there's more, right? I think that was on a slide earlier. The next iteration of this space is our Grad Commons. And in truth, the Grad Commons has somewhat less of a focus on technology and more of a space exclusively for graduate students to study and do research. The Grad Commons came about as a partnership with our graduate and professional student organization because they needed and wanted a dedicated space. So we did a lot of surveying, and I'll probably just kind of run through these slides to give you an idea of what it looks like. But we did a lot of surveying and assessment, reflection, pause, and repeat on how to really design this space for the grad student in mind. And what happened is we found that grad students wanted certain aspects of technology. Thank you. Angela's telling me I need to cut this short. So 26 years. And there's an emphasis on, the technology emphasis was really on things like electrical outlets, right, and a printer and a few workstations, but a greater emphasis on this idea of quiet, dedicated, graduate student only space. So once we were able to do this, okay, here's the live show here. We did some assessment. We found some of the behaviors of our graduate students when they were using the space, how they were using the space, a lot of feedback. A lot of this, plus the lessons learned from the Learning Commons, informed really what was our biggest iteration of this Commons idea that actually was a technology-focused space to really look at the entire research life cycle. And we have heat maps, too.
Are you going to change my, are you going to run my slideshow for me?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right, we'll knock this thing out. I know that we're the thing that is standing between you and a reception, so this is always an awkward spot to be in. So what we're looking at now is a collage of our Scholars Commons. We'll look at a couple more pictures later on. This is the newest of our spaces, and there we go. And I think this one actually needed the partnerships that we're supposed to be talking about more than our other spaces did. We have a... I thought you were doing this for me. No, you're not. Okay, sorry. So this is a blurb that was written by our advancement folks. I don't know that any of us could actually write that, but it worked. It was used to sort of sell the case that we needed to do this renovation. I'm going to move ahead. You're going to move me ahead. This is what we're looking at now is is our advanced or high definition visualization wall. It's called an IQ wall because our information technologies folks named it that, and nobody can remember what the 4 I's stand for, so it is now permanently the IQ wall. During our initial planning, it's our University Information Technologies department that are not part of the library. They suggested that we needed one of these walls in the Scholars Commons, and of course we said, yeah, that'd be a great idea. Then they said that they can build it for us and that they would give it to us. And so what that has done is given them a lot of really good excuses to come over to the library. They use the space, we use the space, but it's been really, really nice to have these new partners that before we had the space, our dean knew their dean. But now we know each other, and it's been a wonderful partnership. They hold edit-a-thons in there. I walked in one day and they had some sort of bizarre game hanging from the ceiling that they were projecting on the IQ wall. So it's been really nice that they are over there a little bit more often than they ever were before. The next slide shows an exhibit space that we put in when we did the Scholars Commons. This is maintained by our library information technologies folks. And apparently when you hang something on a wall, something is going to go wrong with it. So we frequently were having to call our folks on the other side of the building to come and help us figure out what we're supposed to do with things that look like they're just about to break. So now they show up every morning, 2 of them, walk around, take a good look at everything that we have in the Scholars Commons, and make sure that, everything is where it's supposed to be. Additionally, we have 8 consultation rooms. We have very few computers. Before the renovation, we probably had about 60 or 70 computers. That was where big problems would start anyway, so we removed most of them, and almost all of our students now bring in their own devices. I am almost out of time, so shall we call it done? Okay. Oh, yeah, our lecture hall. This is another very popular space in the library. Faculty reserve it. Graduate students manage to reserve it for a variety of different reasons. Did you change me? Good. Okay. I don't have anything else to say about that. Okay. All right. I think we should just go ahead and be done. So. Oh, yes, we do. We have added a lot of programming in the Scholars Commons because we have the space to do it and because people want to be in that space. And so now when we have a dissertation workshop or something like that, we kind of sell out because everybody wants to be there. So it's been a wonderful boost to the library, and it's definitely something that we couldn't have done without the support of our libraries technologies folks as well as our regular university technologies folks. It's a great way to end. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yep. And then very, very quickly, because I'm a man of many words, part of this whole story is that we couldn't do this alone. And really, the Scholars Commons itself is probably the best illustration that we have of how these partnerships really have changed the library itself. And throughout the week, throughout the term, the fall and the spring term, we have consultants in these consultation spaces basically giving office hours. And these consultants represent what we consider everything across the research life cycle. So everything from grant writing help to institutional review board help and subject disciplinary help from librarians, those kinds of things. The idea is that the student, the faculty researcher can come into this space and effectively get help at any time, drop-in wise, from units that really are across the campus, and we've brought them all into one space. So that's really the idea here. And we're done. Yeah, and we have a couple of minutes for questions.
I'm an IU grad from 20 years ago, so it's so cool to see how the
They're
building has changed.
Yeah, they're
so,
everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you keep the undergraduates out of the graduate commons?
That's a card swipe. Yeah, it's not foolproof. So there are two ways. One, the door is locked, right? So graduate student access only. Two, our graduate students can spot an undergrad a mile away, and they are not bashful. So I say that I was involved in the policy and procedure making of this space. I'm basically the liaison between the graduate student organization government and the libraries. And that was the primary focus. How do we keep the undergrads out? You lock them out is the answer.
But they also, whenever we would walk in to put paper in the printers in the graduate commons, they would all just stop and look at you like, oh, we know you don't belong here. So now we just leave the big boxes of paper in there so nobody has to go in and feel this sort of direct attack. It was really horrible. But they're very, very happy.